Hello, my fellow foam flinging enthusiasts. It is Andrew, aka Dart Sweep, and welcome back to another episode of the Foam Zone. It's been a minute. I feel like it's been a very busy summer. I am back from my national tour with Al the Geek and Dart Zone at our Fan Expo national tour. So trying to catch up and get back on schedule. But with that being said, Foam Zone is back. However, next week, Get Off My Lawn will not be airing. Al is going to be on a very fun field trip. And we'll be back in September. So we are going to miss next Wednesday's Get Off My Lawn episode, and then we'll return the following Wednesday with another episode of Foam Zone, which should be fun. We got a bunch of fun guests hopefully lined up for the month of September, looking to get Xbox games, CR Nerf, and I think Jade from Foamdemic on here hopefully. So should be a fun month for sure coming up. But that'll put us back on our regular schedule. I don't know if you guys noticed, but we actually at some point got off schedule to take a break, and Get Off My Lawn was airing when Foam Zone was supposed to be airing. And so this will be a good opportunity to get everything back on schedule and everything back on order. So super exciting. Let's see. Special thanks to Aaron Esser for being our special guest on Get Off My Lawn last week. That was a fantastic show. Thank you so much, Aaron, for joining us. Very insightful. And I think Aaron Esser is going to be joining us for this year's Foamsgiving. So that should be exciting. And speaking of which, if that is something you are interested in participating or donating to, feel free to reach out to us, and we're going to be going to start organizing that live stream happening in November again for fundraising Thanksgiving Toys for Tots. So keep an eye out for that. Let's see what else. ABC, congratulations to ABC, Atlanta Blaster Club, for their fundraising event weekend. Sound like they had a fun time and the event was successful. And congratulations to the winning comp teams. I think Beef Squad and Manatee, or I forget what the names are, but congratulations to the teams for placing and participating. Ragnarok, of course, is around the corner, coming up in October. I believe it's the second weekend in October, so that's like October 10th. October 10th through 13th, I think is the date. So if you need more information regarding that, go ahead online and join the Discord or check out your Facebook groups and register. And if you're planning to compete, get your team registered, of course, for the BTA King of the Hill comp that's going to be happening as well. Also, I know the Canadians, Tang, Jeff Hicks and Jeff Blue, are going to be hosting their Halloween event coming up in October up in Canada. So that should be a lot of fun, a little old school NIT blaster action going in there, shooting around 300 FPS. So that should be fun if you're able to make it up there. I think Al and Maritime Foam will be hopefully joining that event. But yeah, so we are back. Super excited. Trying to get back in the swing of things a little bit, get my bearings straight. I know I owe a bunch of you guys some solos. So I'm planning to get those out. I know I'm doing a series called Better Late Than Never. And we'll just add that to the series there. So I promise I will get you those out to you as soon as possible. And yes, so I think that's it for housekeeping. We'll open up the chat, the live chat. My screen for some reason isn't showing the comments. I'll have to take a look at that. But if you have a comment or a question or anything you want to discuss, just throw that out on the live chat, and we'll see if we can get that relayed to us. But yeah, so I'm super excited for this evening's guest because most of our guests in the past have been in the demographic of being ages 20 and up. You know, a lot of our hobby consists of grown adults acting like kids and playing with kids' toys. But tonight we actually have a very exciting guest, one of our local players who actually has to be a up and coming designer in the hobby, who has released a few designs and mods. That are available on Etsy, but a local Maryland Foam Alliance player comes out to a lot of the events. But I've been meaning to have this guest on for a while. They showed up to a DMV Nerfers event when we first started going, and have been a loyal club member player ever since. So, and throughout the time I've known our guest, it's been a pleasure to see them evolve and grow and learn, and really kind of throw themselves into this hobby space, and create some pretty fun stuff. And actually, our guest is one of my go-to Nerf mechanics. So if I ever have a blaster issue and I'm feeling lazy, I'll just dump this on our guest's lap, and hopefully get it back within a timely manner, which I always do. So, but yeah, nonetheless, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest for the evening, Dylan, who is 15, from the great state of Maryland, who goes by the name of I Shoot Foam. Dylan, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm good. I'm just here because Nerf is fun and I like Nerf.
And because I asked you to, right?
Yep.
Yep.
You came up to me begging.
That's right. And like I was saying, the main reason I wanted to get you on here is because, I mean, you go to the events. A lot of the people that go to these events are literally big kids, grown adults playing with kids' toys. We're talking about 20. I'm 43 myself. So, there's a lot of kind of this demographic of older players getting into this space. And I'm always impressed when there is someone youthful, but not only youthful, but knowledgeable and very talented and skilled. And from the day first times that you guys started showing up to our events, and started showing off what you were working on, I was super impressed. And you've come up with some really, really cool things out there. So I just wanted to give an opportunity to someone that was, a younger player that is up and coming, and kind of get your opinions and viewpoints, and just talk shop from your point of view as someone that's a little bit younger in the hobby. Not to say that you're a kid or anything like that, but you're definitely one of the younger players, at least in our clubs, that plays. So. But yeah, welcome. So why don't you tell a little bit about yourself? Obviously, we know your name is Dylan, but just give a little bit of background, where you're from. We probably don't want to give too much information, so people won't be able to stalk you, seeing that you're a minor. But yeah, just give us a little background regarding about yourself and what you do outside the hobby.
So like you said, I'm from Maryland. I've been doing Nerf for a little over 5 years now, but I joined the club pretty close to when it started. How many games was that in? Like what game?
I think you guys must have showed up to the second or third event that we had when we were official.
So like before I showed up,
that was back in 2021.
I just like taken apart a few big shocks, got an Nexus Pro, what you'd expect. And then I got to the games and I saw how big of a community there really was. And at the time I had just like kind of gotten into 3D printing a little bit. I think we just had like an Ender 3 and printed a few parts here and there. And I really liked how easy it made it to like access these things. Because obviously the Nexus Pro was like my first taste of real power, not just like 80 FPS out of a brast jolt or something. And
Right.
I really wanted to be able to make some of these like blasters I had laying around more like stuff like the Nexus Pro. And that's where I started to get into like old school Nerf, like Nerf Haven days, PVC couplers, big blasts. I have a bin of them behind me. And then I noticed that nobody had really tried meshing the two with 3D printers. So in a lot of my designs, I started trying to incorporate things like couplers, LPA, like just older things that have been kind of forgotten about, modular barrels and stuff like that. So I got more and more into the 3D printing side of it. I got pretty into 3D printing and I did more designs, put a few on Thingiverse, noticed people liked them, and then I just kind of took off with that.
Right. So my question I usually start out with is how did you get introduced to the hobby? How what was your first memory? Your first blaster? How did you get introduced to foam flinging?
The first blaster I ever got was I got a secondhand Maverick for free, and I just had fun with it. And then from there, I think I bought a barricade off of Amazon. And then it just kind of went from there, going to Target, finding the cool ones. And then eventually I had all these blasters laying around. And then I think I saw like a Drac video or something and started taking stuff apart. I think my first mod was a big shock I hammered the air restrictor out of with a flathead and made it shoot rival balls. And I just kind of went from there.
So really just kind of you got your first blaster, you kind of inherited your blaster, and then you just kind of started figuring
Yeah.
out what you liked at that point. Now, was that before you started going to DMV, I'm assuming? How
Oh yeah,
old were
way
you?
before. I
Yeah.
think when I got my Maverick, I was maybe 6. It was a midnight, so first gen.
So you were a wee lad then.
Yeah.
um, and then how did that evolve? I mean, were you had these blasters when you were like 6, and then
hmm
when did you start coming to DMV? How did you find the Nerf? How did you find where you are at this point, or get
Well,
to
when
this
I
point?
when I really got into modding, I decided that I really wanted to join a club, so I just like asked around what are some clubs in Maryland. And I think I was 13 when I joined up first. And somebody recommended DMV, so I showed up to the war, had fun, and kept coming.
Right. So, but before Nerf, I know you have a very extensive collection of Hot Wheels,
hmm
Matchbox. Talk a little bit about that, and how does that kind of translate? Because it does a little bit, kind of the passion for it.
hmm
Your how does your passion, or just talk a little bit about your Hot Wheels collection, and kind of how that translates to foam flinging.
So I collect Hot Wheels because I just got them when I was really young, and then I realized they were rare ones, and I liked the rare ones, and then I bought a bunch of the rare ones, and then I have a bunch of the rare ones in a room, and I just really like them because it's also extends to the Nerf side. It's because I really liked cars, just how they work. They're just interesting to me. But obviously, Hot Wheels cars and Nerf blasters are a lot cheaper than project cars. So for Nerf, the reason I really started working on it was because I couldn't work on anything like a car. And just the whole idea of working on it, putting on new parts, figuring out new ways to make something go fast was just really interesting to me. So it's almost like two sides of the same coin, whereas the Nerf is like the mechanical side of it, and the Hot Wheels are like the looks and the collectability part. So I feel like it all stems from just liking cars, honestly.
Yeah. So my question to the chat is, I am curious if the chat has any hobbies, kind of like what we're talking here, whether it be collecting or activities or anything like that, that you feel kind of translates to the foam flinging hobby, or what you do for foam flinging. So if you have something like that, go ahead and drop that down in the chat. I'm very curious what people have to say, and in general, I'm curious what your other hobbies are and what you guys like to do. So talk about some of your favorite blasters. Are you a Springer or flywheeler? I know exactly what you are. Actually, we'll get
You know
into it.
exact.
I do. We'll get into that, but just generally speaking, what is it about blasters that you really enjoy, and what are some of your favorite blasters?
What I like about blasters most of the time is just how simple they are for how fun they can be. Like, just you get a lot of fun out of something like a night finder, which is $10 and nothing more than a plunger, a spring, a catch, and a trigger. And they're just really easy to work on. So I'd say between flywheelers and springers, I'm more of a springer fan, even though on like a competitive setting, flywheelers are probably a little better. Just springers are more accessible, more fun to work on, in my opinion. Just a little cheaper a lot of the time too, because when you get to competitive springers, I mean, you can build a Caliburn or a Lynx or something like that for under $100. Whereas a flywheeler, when you get into the brushless realm of things, you end up spending $300-400. And if something breaks like a board fries, it's not just a part you reprint. It's a component you need to resolder. Which it's not to say I don't like flywheelers. I have plenty of flywheelers. I love soldering. Just that's my personal preference. But I know what you were thinking I'm gonna say. I love low pressure air, which is LPA, which is like old school super soakers. Like you have to pump it up before you fire it. My favorite blaster of all time is probably the Busby Big Blast. If you can't tell by the bin of like 14 of them behind me, I actually can grab one really quick. I
Yeah,
can reach it. I'm gonna have to take my headphones out.
you're good. Yeah, so I mean, if your club allows HPA
Sure.
or LPA, go ahead and drop that down in the chat. I'd like to see what groups out there are using air powered blasters at their club events.
So this is the
And
Busby Big
YouTube,
Blast.
this is clearly a toy. I just want you to
Yeah.
know. All right, just for the disclaimer, this is a toy. All right, go
Yeah.
ahead. We'll see how long this lasts for.
So this is a Busby Big Blast. It's literally just an air tank. It's a giant air tank. There, I might actually have one in the bin next to me if I can show one.
Yeah.
Nope, that's a barrel for one. Let me grab it. Here we go. I think this is actually a Berserker tank, but they're exactly the same except the pin is a little shorter. So it's literally just a giant air tank like this, pump in the back, and a trigger that pulls this pin. It's stupid simple. All you do is pump it up 4 or 5 times, pull the trigger, and these will send foam darts really far. If you know what this is, then you know what they do. Like this here is a flip clip speed loader, whatever you want to call it. Because what people do with these is they just cut out the front here and glue a PVC coupler. You just stick this in the coupler. You load a foam dart one side, flip it, load a dart the other side, pump it up, and this on a 4V will do like 280, 300, just with nothing more than $10 in PVC and some super glue. So that I mean I really like LPA because you can also do whatever you want with it. So once you build an LPA mod, you have just a coupler. So you can put whatever you want in the coupler. It doesn't have to be one of these. It can be like a slide breach. It can be a Y hopper. It can be like a shotgun absolver. Some people take like hammer shot cylinders or strong arm cylinders and route all the barrels into one thing that connects to this. So you can shoot 5 or 6 darts all at once. There's RSCBs. I even made an inline clip the for these just because nobody had, just for fun. So
Right. So, I mean, you kind of mentioned it, but the appeal of the LPA is kind of the versatility that it allows you, but it's
mhm.
also fun, right? Like,
Oh yeah, it's hilarious to show up to a war especially because I've run 4Bs and like the Sparta rounds, the 300 FPS rounds. Everyone's running their maxed out Lynxes and Saber assemblies and whatnot. And then I just show up with this and just occasionally shoot and tag somebody. It's just fun.
And generally speaking, what would you say really attracts you to the hobby? Why do you love it? A lot of people say, it's the community, it's the people. But what is it? What is it about what is it about foam flinging that attracts you and that you love and that keeps you coming back?
How accessible it is. It's dirt cheap to get into. It's dirt cheap to stay in. I mean, obviously you can spend $800, $1,500 on CNC'd metal blasters, or you can go to a thrift store, pick this up for $2, shove some brass barrels in it and have fun. Like, it's so easy to get into, and especially with things like the Nexus Pro X now, and even the Aeon X, for $25, you can show up to your local field and do really good. Like, they're great blasters. They keep up with all the expensive stuff too. It's just so easy to get into.
Now, question for you and the chat is, do you remember what was your loadout that you brought to your first event? And then how did that change the very next event?
Trying to remember. I think for the first one, I actually don't think I changed it that much between the first and second event. I think I changed it once the FPS cap switched for the field, because I think I first showed up with a hoppered Percy. I don't even know if it was hoppered then, but a Percy's. And then I had a Foam Knight XE, which is the weird little pistol where the plunger's overhead. It's kind of like an upside down gecko, but they're really weird. It's actually pretty simple. I mean, pretty similar to the Zinc, but just not as like efficiently designed. But it was really fun. Just 110 FPS. It was great for the 120 rounds. And then for the modded rounds, I think I ran my Brast Nexus Pro. And I think I had a secondary. I can't remember what it was actually. But yeah, that's what I ran. I did actually switch out the Nexus Pro because I learned very quickly 17-30 seconds Brast does not like field darts.
On a hot day.
Ever.
So let's talk a little bit. Again, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here is because of how old you are and kind of what you're doing now as a designer. I think the first design I remember you doing and coming up to me was a couple years ago when the Dart Zone Mark 2.1 pistol came out. And you had designed a mag release for it, an extended mag release. So talk a little bit. I know you kind of touched on it a little bit before, but tell us, how did you get into designing, and talk about your designs, and maybe do a little show and tell, and tell us what you're working on these days. So let's start off first. Again, just kind of reiterate how you got into the designing aspect of it. And did it start with the 2.1 mod, or was that just for me?
That was just for you. The 2.1 mod. It would be wonderful if it was that easy to design something like that just off the start, because that you need Fusion 360 for. I don't recommend starting in Fusion 360 unless you already have a little bit of previous experience, like at all. So I started, I think just my dad showed me Tinkercad one day and I just like played around with it. Like this was before we had a 3D printer. I just like moving the shapes around and just making stuff. And then we got, I think, Delta Mini, like $70 3D printer off Amazon, just because they seem neat, easy enough to use. And I just started designing little trinkets, like keychains, stuff like that in Tinkercad. And then I realized that I wanted to make some mechanical stuff. So I kind of was able to make a few things in Tinkercad, but I eventually had to move on to Fusion 360 because it's a lot like it's a lot easier to change dimensions of things because you're not working with predetermined shapes. You get to like you're working on profiles. And I think my
And
first functional fusion
what what
design,
what kind of things were you designing in Tinkercad?
just like trinkets. I think I made a few like muzzle caps for barrels so I'm not stabbing people with brass when I'm running around on the field.
That's fair.
Uh, I didn't make anything too crazy. I think I might have made a few adapters for stuff. Nothing too interesting. And it's also good for remixing STLs because it like Fusion 360 doesn't love STL files since they're a mesh. But Tinkercad, since it's just based on the shape, it was pretty easy to like mash two parts together. Like I think one thing I did was there was a site I wanted as a Picatinny site, and I was able to just like chop off the bottom of that, take a Picatinny profile, and just mash the two together.
And then you moved on to into Fusion.
Yeah, from there I think the first functional thing I made in Fusion was a bolt handle for my XBZ long strike. You just like it just friction fits over some brass, but I was able to like figure out the diameter for the brass and how I wanted it centered a lot easier. Because in Tinkercad, you just kind of put the two shapes where you want them. But in Fusion, you're able to set up constraints and all this. So it made that a lot easier. And then from there, I started just making some of the stuff that's on my printables.
And when you were learning Fusion, were you teaching yourself? Were you going on YouTube doing tutorials, or how did you learn to do Fusion since it's a more in depth uh, app?
So the way I learned Fusion, I wouldn't recommend using YouTube videos for something like that to start, at least at all. The way I learned was I was just on the laptop. I was like, okay, I need to move on from Tinkercad. I'm getting somewhat decent at this. I actually want to make functional parts. So I started, and my dad has some experience in similar programs like SolidWorks. So he kind of like explained to me how it worked, and I just kind of sat there. I think the first thing I made was I just like messed around with the sketch and the pattern tools to make like a wheel. And once you figure out how Fusion works, because it doesn't use bodies, it uses profiles. Once you figure it out, it's just a matter of learning how to use the different tools and when. It's pretty easy once you like get the hang of it.
I do want to make a side note and a quick shout out to your dad, Calvin, who
Mhm.
always brings munchies, cookies
Yep.
to share at all our events. So thank you, Calvin. He's a very cool dude, and it's always great having you guys. So tell us some of the other designs that you were working on early in Fusion, and then kind of how that evolved into some of the bigger projects, and maybe talk a little bit about those and show us what you got.
Yeah. So from after that bolt handle, I think I made a few other small, like just friction fit pieces here and there. And the first like mechanical part I made in Fusion, I think that actually was that mag release. That took a while to make because I got my Mark 2.1 a little bit earlier than everybody else. So I immediately opened it up and posted internals pictures. And I was like, okay, I have it. There's a going issue with it. I need to put this part out first, just because this would be the first design I would make that would be really popular, I feel like. So I went ahead and I immediately just rushed to make it, went through tons of iterations. I just started by reverse engineering the original piece, just sitting there with a pair of calipers, making just changes until I got one that worked. And then the real challenge of it was figuring out because the way the shell is, there's no way to like hook the extension of the mag release. If you've ever seen a 2.1 for anybody watching, it's really hard to hook the extension around. So I spent a while just figuring out a good way to do that. And then I eventually got a part I liked, and I think I ended up taking down the Etsy listing for the files because I don't really like selling files that much. I think I just listed that one because I was like, this one took a lot longer than everything else. When in reality, it was probably just because I was pretty new to Fusion. But also the dovetail could break, and I didn't like it depends a lot on your printer and your filament. Like most printers could make one that would be just fine, but I also didn't like charging for files that weren't perfect. So one day I might revise it and just put it up for free, but I did take that one down just because I wasn't happy with it. I only sold like one or two. So it's not like there. It's not like I just ran off with an exclusive thing. I sold like one or two files. I was like, oh, people actually like this because I got messages on Etsy like, ooh, this is pretty good. So from there, I just started focusing on like making these files really accessible because part of the thing I like about the community is how easy it is to get like stuff like the Caliburn or newer stuff like the Slab and all of Silly's designs. They're all just free. You can just get them, download them, put them on your cheap 3D printer and spend $20-$30 in filament and have a blaster. So all of my designs in between that and now have been pretty much free. If they aren't out for free, it's because I didn't post them because I didn't like them that much or they were too obscure to post. Like I think I have like I'm probably not gonna post the this thing I'm working on now, which is a Mega XL adapter for this marshmallow blaster, because this is like a pretty hard to find variant. And I mean, I can't imagine many other people who are weird enough to want to run this,
Yeah,
especially if they have one.
yeah, no. For the audience at home, Dylan and his dad were over this past weekend for a mod party, and Dylan asked me for a marshmallow, which unfortunately I did not have. But that's what you were working on.
Yeah, Donut gave this to me, and I was just like, I love this, and just started taking it apart and fixing it, and then I fixed it, and then he said, Donut told me the next war I had to have this firing Mega XL, so it's what I'm working on. It's actually pretty much functional. It just need to adjust a couple tolerances because it gets kind of stuck when you open it unless you push it back. I'm actually running a print for the next one right now.
Nice. So before we go on talking a little bit about more of the things you're working on, when it comes to designing stuff, what is your motivation, inspiration? What are you looking for? Are you looking to solve an issue, a problem, or you're just challenging yourself to see if you can make something cool? Or look, what is the motivation? What are you looking for? What's important to you when you're designing something?
So when I design something, or at least start designing something, it's usually because either I want the part or I know that the community would like need the part. And a lot of times with like blasters that come out, like new stuff, a lot of times some people will be the first to design a file, but then put it up on Etsy for like money, which is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with selling files. But I remember like being new to the hobby and like when you start the hobby, you don't want to go out spending all the money you can. You want to like just start with something cheap. So I usually try, like, I've had a few designs I've actually spent weeks on where somebody was just like, nobody's made this yet. And I've been like, nobody has made that yet. And then I'll just start working on it. Like my Nexus X barrel. I mean, not my Nexus X, Strife X barrel. I made a N Strike adapter for it. And because as soon as it was released, I was like, somebody's going to make that. And like 2 weeks had gone by and nobody had made one. And one of my friends was like, I wish there was one of these. And I was like, there isn't. And then made one. So put that out for free. And it got a bunch of downloads. So I mean, that's usually why I do it, just because either the community doesn't have a file for it yet, or I don't have a file for it yet.
Right. So yeah. So demand,
Hmm,
basically.
pretty much.
So let's talk a little bit more about some of the things you're designing.
So recently, I've been working on some parts for the Nexus Pro X on commission, which I can share my screen here and pull it up. I have some parts I've been making for a hopefully opening soon online store, Chaos Bunny Customs. It's not quite up yet, so I can't share a link or anything. But I designed this grip here. This is a 4 grip for the Nexus X because the original one is a little awkward for some people, and it doesn't. It's also a little ugly because it doesn't match the angle of the pistol grip. And then this is a stock I designed for it too. It's got so the neat thing about this one is the only hardware it needs is a few M3 screws and some elastic for this. And it works really well. And it's also very modular because I can pop open this like shroud, and then I designed an adjustable cheek rest for it. And then I have dart holders that mount into these little holes I kind of put all around. Just two M3 screws, put that there. Space holder for spring spacers, stuff like that. And I also designed a new pistol grip for it. Also for the store opening up. Hopefully it should be soon. It was supposed to open a little bit ago, but there have been some issues. So hopefully it'll be up like in the next week or two. But I designed these parts. These were some of the more challenging parts because especially the beaver tail on this, since it's kind of a more of an organic shape, Fusion doesn't love this. So I kind of had to do a lot of trial and error to get it fit nice and flush. But I do think it is some of my best work so far. The grips are really comfortable. The stock works great. And in the designing process, something I always find to be like a fun challenge is making it easily printable. A good example of that is actually the solo barrel I made.
Well, I was going to ask, what's the print orientation for the grip there? And are
Just
you?
print it flat on the base. It needs some support because
I was going to
obviously
ask.
this is designed around an injection molded blaster, which is kind of unfortunate for a lot of these Nexus X parts. The stock, since it just needs to be on buffer tube, everything for this can actually be printed no support. Even though it looks like some of it can't, it actually is really printer friendly. But stuff like the mag releases and safety delete I designs, unfortunately, since it's meant to have like some of it has like screw posts sticking out both sides, so you can't really print it flush. So unfortunately, some of that stuff's just impossible to do. But for example, this solo barrel here, I spent a lot of time making sure. So if you look back in here, I actually did a few test prints. I used an Ender 3 I hadn't used in a while just to see if this overhang could be done on a stock cooling duct, because this was when I was printing stuff on my Ender 2, which has a big 5015 fan on it. And actually, I don't think this is the most recent version of the file for some reason. But the sights on the released one are like swooped in a way that they don't need any support. I was able to make even this latch here not need any support. So it could all be printed, no support, less waste material, good bed adhesion, all that. Pretty easy. Because again, like not everybody has a Bamboo Labs and stuff because those are expensive. In fact, I don't even have a Bamboo Labs. I have a kitted out Soval. My dad does. So I know not every printer is capable of some of the support-free designs I've seen. So on a lot of my designs, I aim for them to be super accessible and easy to make. So, yeah.
Very cool. And what are some of your favorite designs that you're working on right now, or that you're going to be releasing, aside from the ones that you just showed us?
So I'm really happy with the Nexus X parts, but I also have coming just that I'm working on right now is that marshmallow thing, which I'm excited for, but I probably won't bother making a listing for. I do have a few parts for my SV06, my 3D printer I designed, just to solve a couple issues with it. Like I have somewhere. I have a motor mount that lowers the stepper motors for the Z, so you can run an old, like a fancy coupler of some kind. Because I see a lot of people that modify their printers like that. They need to buy a motor with an integrated lead screw, which is like $40 a motor or something, when it could just be, here it is. This part that just spaces the motor down instead of removing the thing that needs to be moved out of the way. So I probably put those files up. I also have an adapter for the coupler. And I'm also working on this. It might take a minute to load. There we go. Which is a remixed version of the Tulip by Poppy. Because I helped beta test it, and I noticed that there were some really good elements of the design, like the whole breech design. It never jams. It's really nice, and it's really low hardware too. Like I think the entire combined hardware cost is like $40 or something. And a lot of it's stuff you'll already have sitting around, like it uses mostly M3 screws, but it had some rigidity issues, like it could be a little bendy. So what I've done here is I've started changing some stuff to make it easier to print, like the cutout for the magwell. I made it because the original one was just flat here, which isn't very FDM friendly. So I made it so it slopes, so the overhang's a little more printable. I added a structure bar up here, a trigger guard, which would also, in theory, help a little bit with how rigid it is. And the main thing is I added a 8mm smooth rod here, which this seems like kind of a big addition to the hardware cost, but these are like $5 for two of them. So for $2.50, you fix one of the biggest issues on the blaster. It seems really worth it to me. So it's at the moment, I have a printed prototype of it. It works really well. I'm just working on simplifying it. Like I removed some unnecessary screws. I'm probably also going to here, let me hide the mag here because I don't need that. There it is. So I'm also probably going to make it so this, instead of having 4 screws that hold this top piece in, and there's also a screw under the pusher here that is just a hole that goes down to the linear rail so you can access it easier. What I'm probably going to do is I'm going to get rid of these 2 screw holes and then make it so instead of this just being an access hole, I'm going to make it so it actually mounts a 3rd screw there, which I feel like would be a more efficient use of hardware because there isn't a whole lot of like pulling or pushing stress on this part here. Most of it's all back here. So I'm just doing some stuff to make it easier to print right now and get rid of some hardware that you don't really need.
Very cool. So, what is, in your opinion, what's important when it comes to doing a design? What are you looking for?
So the most important part of a design is just the functionality. Does it work? I'm not sure. Andrew, are you talking right now? Okay, no. There was just a little bit of lag, sorry. So the most important part is just functionality. Does it work? And then from there, I usually go to like a little bit of how easy it is to how easy is it to print? How easy is it to assemble? And then I start getting like, cutting some corners off to be smoother so it looks a little nicer. And then I start integrating that printability into the cosmetics of it because something that ends up being really challenging on some designs, actually, even though it seems like it wouldn't be that hard, is making a part printable and good looking. because printers have their limitations. They can't do it. I mean, obviously with supports, they can do bridging and stuff, but there's limits to FDM printing. So working around those limits and ending up with a very finished looking product can be kind of a challenge, which blasters like the slab do really well. The slab is a really easy to print and assemble blaster. So in my designs, I aim to do that too, just making it look decent.
If you could design any blaster to be the perfect blaster for you, what would that blaster be?
I would probably design some kind of modular Springer of some kind. I haven't actually considered starting a design like that because there are already tons of options. There are things like the multi-tool that already exists that fill these things. But I think what I would do is I'd make a really hardware efficient blaster that can take different barrel types without needing different hardware. So, because this is one of like the old school components, this coupler I have here is actually two couplers. It's a 1/2 inch PVC and 1/2 inch CPVC because they're in like old school blasters. All the attachments use either CPVC like this or bigger PVC for stuff like slide breeches and Y hoppers. So I would probably do something similar for like a dart gate. So you can use different types of barrels. So you can use brass and aluminum barrels on the same part. And then I'd probably make it so it has lots of options, like a version with a linear rail and a version without, because stuff like linear rails can really add to hardware costs. They can be like 15 to 20 bucks for a single part that isn't even necessary. So I'd probably focus on making it so like the platform, because stuff like the Caliburn, it really boils down to just a plunger, a sear, a catch, a trigger, breach, and then there's stuff you can add on around it. I'd probably want a blaster that's really good about being able to be made as almost like a base model, and then you can add fancy stuff if you feel like you need it, and then make it easily adaptable for different ammo types, like make the magwell and the breech clearly separate printed parts. So if you were to say convert it to a rival for whatever reason or mega or whatever, you could just very easily do that with only a few printed parts instead of needing to like reprint a trigger guard or something that's non-functional just to change stuff like that.
So, school just started this week for you, I believe.
Yep.
So again, being one of our younger club members that attend events, talk a little bit about that dynamic, being a younger player, playing with olders. It's probably not so much relevant now that you're 15, but when you first started coming, you were 12 years old, so talk about that. And then really the question is, how are you able to manage being a student and also entertain your thirst for foam flinging?
So with what you said about playing with like other older players, especially as a new player, I noticed that at first, like it's not like there's anything wrong with this, but I completely understand it. A lot of people would assume I don't know a lot because a lot of the times the 12-year-olds that come to our group don't know a lot. Like I think we've only ever had like one or two players that like were my age and stuck around and got into it. So I like it's not like I blame this, like it's not something we need to fix or anything. But when I showed up, I noticed a lot of people were like surprised that I knew these things. And I noticed that it like people weren't like reluctant to accept that. People were very good about like just, oh, you know what you're talking about. Okay, so we're on the same level. Like I don't feel like there's much of an issue of like younger players being looked down upon, which is I was actually expecting, like when I joined that, I was actually expecting that a little bit, but I was pleasantly surprised by how like welcoming everything was. And that's one of the reasons I do Nerf versus like airsoft or paintball, is just the how easy it was to get into and how accessible it is. Just because as a 12-year-old, if you're looking at communities where the decent entry level blaster or marker or whatever you want to call it is over like $150, and there's like a lot more like optimized play and it's a lot more competitive versus the more it like Nerf feels a lot more relaxed compared to other things like that, and it feels more about just having fun rather than like a full-fledged sport. Because when I show up to a Nerf game, obviously like the competitive fields, foam pro tournament, that's something completely different. I don't expect to be like playing for points or anything like that. You play to have fun. You play to mess with your souped up toy and see how well it does, see where it breaks, see what happens, just have fun.
Right. And then the second part of that question was, how do you balance being a student, especially now that you're 15 and you're in
Mm-hmm.
high school? But how do you manage? Because you do spend, yeah, I mean, you're
Mm-hmm.
committed. You show up to every event and you're designing, and
Mm-hmm.
clearly we see what's going on in the background. How do you balance being a student and being able to manage enough time to do foam flinging?
Poorly. Um, so when I'm doing my schoolwork, it's just schoolwork, and when I come home, I just do Nerf stuff, and then eventually consider doing my homework at some point in there.
That's honest. That's fair.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any tips or recommendations, suggestions for younger players out there looking to get into the hobby, looking to join a group? And then also any tips or recommendations for managing school and Nerf?
So this is going to sound really counterintuitive, especially given some of the stuff I've said, but do not buy a Nexus Pro X as your first blaster you consider like messing with. Just take apart a Night Finder. Just take apart a Night Finder. Mess with it if you don't, because not everyone wants to be a modder. I get that. You can be a modder, you can be more into the playing side, you can be more into the painting side, but like I've noticed a lot of people online, not just younger kids, but a lot of it is younger kids just not knowing how to maintenance their blasters, just because they don't like understand how it works at all. But just like maybe watch a video or two, like the Captain Xavier's. He has some really good like reassembly videos on blasters. Watching those would be pretty helpful, I'd imagine. Just like I don't expect you to like know how to reverse engineer a Nexus Pro X. Just like understand the principles behind it working. Like just know the spring pushes the plunger, which pushes the air, which pushes the dart. Just understand how it works and then buy the Nexus X if you like it. Don't be that person posting about not being able to fit your full length drum into your Nexus X. Like just figure out how stuff works.
And then the second part of that is any suggestions, recommendation, tips for being a younger player, going to events and dealing with school at the same time.
The events are going to be on the weekend. Just do your homework before the event, not during the event, because capture the flag isn't super fun with a math page in the other hand. But just like I'm not going to pretend school takes up every minute of your life. Obviously, it can if you take every club you possibly can. But I'm in advanced classes. I have homework. I'm not just doing the minimum amount possible so I can play Nerf. But you're going to have time to play Nerf. Like,
Yeah.
it's not going to, don't think Nerf, because Nerf isn't a huge time. It's only as big of a commitment as you make it. If you only go to every other event, you can only go to every other event. It's fine. If you don't have time to make a giant integration project or something like that, You don't have to. Just do what you can when you can.
That's great. That's fantastic. Well, we are hitting that 9 o'clock mark, so we'll start wrapping things up. I forgot to do this at the beginning of the show just because I'm out of practice. But World Foam Alliance, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Tell a friend, tell a family member. Takes a village. Go ahead and register yourself or your club on the worldfoamalliance.org website. And we'll start connecting and getting things together. I know I mentioned this before. We are in discussions of overhauling the website a little bit to get that updated. So we'll be hopefully getting that done. Foamsgiving is coming up in November. So if you'd like to participate, feel free to reach out for us. We got a great lineup and a bunch of really fun stuff to be auctioning off. So stay tuned for more information regarding that. And like I said, next week we'll be off the air, and then we'll return the following week with the next episode of Get Off My Lawn with Captain Xavier and Al the Geek. And then we'll be back with the Foam Zone the following week, Wednesday after that. And that will put us back to our regular schedule of when we're supposed to be doing these. So that would be great. But Dylan, I want to thank you and your dad for bringing munchies and cookies. But I want to thank you for being our guest tonight. It was super exciting to have insight from a young designer and player. And I would love to have more guests that are kind of in your demographic, whether you're just a player or getting into designing or trying to start a club. If you are interested in talking shop and you're a younger player, hit us up. Love to get you on and have you on as a guest. But Dylan, where can people find you?
I have a printables page. I also have a YouTube channel. Don't go on my YouTube channel. I don't post anything. Actually, that's about it. I just have a printables. If you want to go on there, I think I have a donation thing set up. Give me money for no good reason. I won't spend it wisely. I promise. If you want to, when it opens that Chaos Bunny custom shop, you'll be able to support me if you buy some of my designs there. But that's only when that opens, I guess. Really quick, I also wanted to answer a few questions I saw in the live chat.
Oh, yeah.
I saw somebody ask, can you get into 3D blaster design without a printer? You can, I guess, but you'd probably want access to, I guess the two ways you could do it is you could either have access to a makerspace where you could use a printer there, like some schools have 3D printers, mine does. Or what you can also do is you can just, like, if you have a friend or somebody online who's willing to help you test, you can. But I mean, you can go on Facebook Marketplace, just save up for a printer. It's really worth it. They're not, like, especially now with stuff like the Bamboo Labs A1 Mini, you could probably find a lightly used one on Facebook Marketplace for like $150. Get some filament, just save up for a month or two. It's worth it. And just checking to see if there were any other questions. Yeah, it looks like that's about it.
All right. Well, Dylan, any final words, closing remarks that you would like to share with the audience?
Just stay safe. Don't eat nails. They don't taste very good. Yeah, don't drink and drive, Andrew.
I don't know. What? So Dylan, great having you on. It was fantastic. If you guys are interested in checking out Dylan's stuff, go ahead, or I Shoot Foam stuff, go ahead and check out the printables page, and you can find you can find Dylan at our local Maryland Foam Alliance events. So thank you so much, Dylan. Appreciate you. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this evening's episode of the Foam Zone. Like I said, we'll be back in 2 weeks. 3 weeks. I can't do math. We'll be back at some point. But again, thank you for joining us. And we'll see you on the next episode. Appreciate you guys. And don't forget to dart sweep. Have a good one, guys.